Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Glamorous Genealogist. Now today I'm going to take my own advice and I'm going to put down some information for some relatives that I just met. Recently I did 23andMe DNA testing. As soon as I got my results in, I had a match of very close distance, which would have been a second cousin. I was looking and I thought, well, I'm going to contact this person. And I don't really believe it. I don't think it really is my cousin. I think, that this could just be some kind of a hoax they do to reel people in to buy bigger and longer and more testing. Turns out it was the daughter of my cousin who I'd lost touch with. And I used to spend a lot of time with my cousin when I was a kid growing up. And it was so exciting to meet his daughter, and she was actually really excited to meet us too. So this is what this is all about today. I want to talk a little bit about my dad again and his brother. I know my dad was such a character and so interesting, and some of this may be reruns if you've seen any of the other videos, but this is a standalone, and this is mostly for family. So I'm going to talk about my Uncle Donald Earl Bowles, and his brother, my dad, Robert Heston Bowles, and their sister, Betty Bowles. These three were born just around the time, just before the Depression in the United States of America, and their mother was Vera Mae Strickling, and Harley Edward Bowles, but everyone knew him as Jack. Most of the families around there in Ashland worked at the factories. There was Faultless, and Hess & Clark was they produced a lot of things for farming and that sort of thing. And then National Latex. At one time, Ashland, Ohio was the balloon capital of the world, and I think they also made a lot of golf balls. They invented the featherweight golf ball. And they also had when you were a kid and you went on a tour of the factories, there was one room where you weren't allowed to go as a kid, but I think they made condoms. Anyways, Uncle Don and Dad and Betty were their whole lives just thick as thieves, really as close as brothers and sisters could be. And they were really small. They came home one day and found Vera, their mom, deceased, and she was about 22 years old, so it was a really, really sad. Actually, she was 29 years old. I'm very sorry. She was 29 years old, and a really, really sad event in their lives, and it stayed with them forever. But Betty then became kind of the strong person in the family. They all really watched each other's back. Their dad, Harley, remarried, and then he also had 6 more children. And really all of them, I think throughout their lifetime, had quite a good bond. Now, if you're wondering, some of the personality traits of these Bowleses are that they love anything with an engine. So motorcycles, race cars, anything, whatever it is. If it goes vroom vroom, they like it. So I'm going to show you some pictures of my dad, who used to do stock car racing. Both Don and Dad, as you know, my dad served in the military, but Don did as well. And I took a long time to find Don's military records because I thought both my dad and he were in the Army, in the infantry, and Don wasn't. He was in the Navy. And gosh, was I surprised today somebody sent me a picture over of Don, and there he was in his Navy clothes, and I'm like, oh gosh, why didn't I look there? So he was on the USS Wyandotte. It was named the Wyandotte after Wyandotte, Ohio. And a bunch of the fellas from that area were on the Wyandotte. It was taken out of decommission in the early 40s and recommissioned for the military. It was attacked twice, once quite badly, and from the records that I found, Uncle Don would have been on board when the attack occurred by the Japanese. it was severely injured in two places, one where it split the hull, and then some other explosions went off because they used something called picric acid. I don't really know what that is, but it's something that enhances the explosions. It deteriorates metal. That's all I know about picric acid. And I think it also is quite toxic for the soldiers to breathe in. So at some point, Uncle Don was taken prisoner, and this is where I still don't have the records. He was in a prisoner of war camp. I have found the records that he was in a prisoner of war camp with the Germans, and this doesn't really fit from what I've found so far because all the areas that he went, the boat was attacked by the Japanese. He, was sailing, the Wyandottes sailed all these areas which were mostly being barraged by the Japanese. So if you were taken prisoner by the Japanese, you had a 40% chance of being not coming out alive. If you were taken prisoner by the Germans, you had a 99% chance of coming out alive. So they clearly were feeding the prisoners, even though my dad said when he finally saw Don again right after the war, when they were coming back home, that Don was incredibly emaciated and really, really, really underfed. But he was alive. So after that, I know I've told you the story in another video where Dad and Don both married sisters right after the war. But Don stayed married to Myrtle and Mert Fisher. And I want to tell you about Mert because I just thought she was just a real lady, just a doll. She loved to sunbathe. She'd put on a halter top and some cute short shorts, and she'd sit out in the sun, and she'd always have her nails done and her hair braided, and she was just a really sweet lady. Mert was really crafty. She could do needlework and played piano. I remember she gave me drawing lessons a couple of times. I just always, was very fond of her and thought she was a dear lady, and I always kind of wanted to be like her when I grew up. And I wish I had more stories about them because we did spend a lot of time at their house on the weekends. We would go over and visit either Don, or we would go over and visit Aunt Betty and her kids. But Don's kids and he loved motorcycles, and so it seemed like every time we went over there was a new motorcycle or a new mini bike, and then we'd all take a turn on the mini bike if we were feeling brave that day. And I remember when he very first got one that the kids took it out, and I think half of us ended up in the dirt with it. But and we all loved to go fishing, usually at some little river or creek or something, but Don and Dad and all of us would go fishing. That was kind of a family thing to do. I just know that Dad and Don were really close and fond of each other, and Betty, their sister, was also a wonderful, strong woman. And she had, to encounter, various challenges in her life with, having started out so hard with just, her mom passing. And then she herself, when she was married, she lost a child very young. And so she went through a lot, but she was always strong. And I remember going over to see her, and we were always so skinny when we were kids, who knew? But she would constantly, after a meal, she would poke us in the tummy, and she would say, "Oh, I feel an empty spot, you need to eat some more." So she'd make us eat a little bit more. And I remember going over there, and was it Christy? Was it you? Christy played the accordion, and my cousin Kenny, he would get out a little, I guess it was a little ukulele, and he would do Elvis impersonations. So it's really cute. Okay, when Dad and Don were little, I do recall that they got into quite a bit of trouble because they went to Savannah school when they were little kids, and they had figured out somehow how to make those, my dad used to call them cherry bombs, and it's some kind of a little thing you could make. I think you put like some kind of oil or gas into a bottle with a now I'm describing a Molotov cocktail. I don't know, but it was these little things they used to make, and they put them down the toilets at the school, and I guess they caused quite a disaster with the plumbing doing that. So that's the kind of stuff they got themselves into. And then they also, I recall my dad telling me one of the times he broke an arm was because he and Don were up on the top of the barn and decided that it would be fun to like jump into bales of hay off of the barn, and that succeeded several times until finally, they, landed wrong and my dad broke an arm. It's all fun and games until somebody puts an eye out, and that's never been more true than in our family. Okay, you guys. Love you. Bye.